If you've been listening to the Eat More Carbs podcast, you know that Reilly and I are both in our running era. To make sure that we're properly fueled for training, we're using both carbohydrates and 2 Before.
2 Before is an all-natural pre-workout designed to enhance athletic performance through the benefits of New Zealand blackcurrant berries. Studies have shown these berries to increase vasodilation and prime the body to kickstart muscle recovery. These antioxidant-rich berries have a sweet and tangy flavor and will level up your performance and recovery. Use code Reilly for 20% off 20 packs and multi-serve packs online at 2before.com.
This is the Eat More Carbs podcast. Hello and welcome to the Eat More Carbs podcast. My name is Jenna Fisher and I'm here with my co-host Reilly Beatty. Today we're going to be talking about sports nutrition products that you might be wasting your money on.
Before we get started, a quick reminder that we are now accepting new one-on-one coaching clients. Our concierge sports nutrition coaching programs are an individualized way for you to get nutrition support so that you can meet your goals. Apply today using the link in the bio.
Reilly, what's your high and low?
So I'm going to start off with my low. It is a little bit of a story. I was recently at Costco and I love Costco, even though it's just Robbie, myself, and a 5-month-old baby. We regular Costco on a weekly basis. There's no shame in it. Always looking for new products. And one of the things that we're always looking for are like quick dinners. There was this new product that came out. It was a Kevin's brand. Are you familiar?
Oh, yeah. White packaging.
White packaging. Yep. And they have this new product. It's this like paleo beef and broccoli. Said it takes like 5 minutes to make. Perfect. We have our protein, right? We have the beef, we have the color, which is our broccoli. You can easily add rice. I got my performance plate. I grabbed my Kevin's beef and broccoli, checking out. And if you're not familiar with Costco, when you walk out of Costco, they check your receipt and they check all the items in your cart. The guy, this very nice older gentleman, looks at my cart and points at my beef and broccoli and says, "This is super popular and I'm so glad you bought this because this is super healthy." Great. Can I continue on now, please? He goes, "Yeah, my doctor said, you need to be eating these paleo foods like this because it doesn't contain any sugar." I was like, okay, great. He was like, stops me and he was like, "No, like if you don't know, like sugar is really, really bad for you. And, you should try to go paleo like 3 days per week because, it's better than cutting out, sugar all the time because then, if you go cold turkey on the sugar, then your body's not going to be able to adjust and then you're going to crave it. But, if you just go paleo like 3 days per week, like my doctor told me, that's a better way to do it." Well, that's great. Like, I'm glad that you found something that works for you. Guy would not let it go. And he kept being like, this is, sugar is really, really bad for you and all this stuff. And like, you need to be really careful on your carbohydrate intake. And I was like, okay, thanks. I'm going to add rice. Bye. Like, I'm out. It just is a quick reminder that we really need to be careful with providing blank nutrition recommendations because I've become really, really aware of it now, like having a daughter. I'm never going to be saying those things to her, but that could be, she's going to be with me in the future at Costco and making those recommendations can be very dangerous. And yes, he was trying to be really helpful and provide, nutrition recommendations that his doctor gave. But this is just a quick reminder that we do really need to be careful the messaging that we're sharing with people and the messaging that is going especially to the younger generation.
It's hard when somebody has something that their doctor has recommended for them and we have no idea what's going on with them medically or why their doctor recommended that for them. But there's a good chance that whatever that is going on, that the reason why their doctor recommended that is also not going on with you or the person that they're recommending it to, which is what makes it really, really hard to just say, oh, this is what's good for me, so therefore it's also good for you, where we have no idea that like the needs of that person, the energy output of that person compared to you are even remotely similar.
Exactly. And like this podcast is built for athletes, right? So we're talking about eat more carbohydrates, and we're just a podcast, right, for very active individuals. And this nutrition advice might not be the right advice for everybody. And that's also totally okay. And I think what's really, really challenging is, especially with social media, we've really simplified it. And people are so confused because they think certain nutrition information applies to everybody and it's just so individualized. And I mean, we always talk about like we need to change the name of the podcast. It depends because it really does depend on you as an individual. On a more positive note, my high is that I keep forgetting I'm not pregnant and I'll do something I'll be like, oh, I can do a burpee or like I can do a ball slam or like I can carry all the groceries from my trunk into my house on one go because I'm not pregnant. And it is a nice reminder because I didn't have the best pregnancy experience. So shout out to not being pregnant anymore.
I'm glad that season of life for you was nothing more than just a season.
Yes. What about you? What are your high and low?
My high these next couple of weeks might be all related to the Olympics and the Olympic trials. But my high is just that I've been watching a lot of track and field events, and a lot of the running events that have been happening have just been so fun to watch. But specifically, I'm talking about the 16-year-old from Maryland. I don't remember his name, but I think I watched his prelim, his semi, and his final in the 400. And just watching him compete at that level with such poise in competing on like one of the biggest stages at that young of an age, I just was like cheering for him. And even though he didn't make the individual, I think there's a good chance, or at least they're saying there's a good chance that he made the 4x4 relay team. And just so cool to see one of the youngest male athletes on the track and field team for the United States is just a really cool thing to watch and just like witness as a part of history. So my low, on the other hand, everyone in Arizona in the summertime, it gets so cranky. Like people are rude to one another. And I think it's probably weather related, but like everything really slows down here. So like people just sort of like rude to one another, like trying to get a cart at the grocery store. People like get frustrated if you're not fast enough and like that kind of thing, which is so different from like the Midwest that I am used to, having lived in Ohio for the past 3 years, where everybody just has that like kindness, I guess, that they're interacting with people outwardly towards one another. So just a really weird situation and time to be in Arizona, where people are just like, in my experience, just kind of frustrated and cranky with one another. And I really think that has to do with like the weather, and like people are kind of pent up and like feeling that type of way because we can't really like get out and like do much right now. So anytime that you are trying to get a parking spot or anything like that, like people are just like snippety and rude, and it's just unusual and I don't like it.
Do you think it's like reverse seasonal depression because you can't go outside?
Yeah, I really do. And I think that it's even more unusual because like all of my life, I've like looked forward to summertime, especially growing up in Colorado. Like that was when you were outside the most. To have this like very drastic difference where it's like, oh no, we're inside most of the summer. It's just a weird pattern to be used to. And like looking at the thermometer right now and it says the high is 108. Like I'm not going to go outside in 108. No. So I get it that people would be like cranky when they're trying to get inside quickly and get back into air conditioning. But I don't know. It's just weird.
Yeah, I feel that because like being in Charleston, like the temperature on the thermometer is not as hot, but we have that humidity. So, and now like being with Charlie all the time, like she can't go outside when it's super hot out. So therefore I can't go outside. And it's just so weird because I'm like, am I like spending like less time outside in the summer, which again is such like a mind shift from growing up.
Yeah, 100%. In today's episode, we're talking about sports nutrition products that you might be wasting your money on. The first one is BCAAs. So first off, Reilly, what are BCAAs?
BCAAs, or branched chain amino acids, are 3 of our essential amino acids. And we can say that those are probably the most important maybe for muscle protein synthesis on a very simplified level. So those are going to be leucine, which a lot of people talk about leucine, and we're going to jump into that one, isoleucine, and then valine. And these branched chain amino acids, they are digested and distributed a little bit differently compared to your other essential amino acids, and that's why they're so important for muscle protein synthesis.
So right off the bat, when I hear that they're important for muscle protein synthesis, why then would they be a waste of money if there's something that can potentially contribute to that muscle protein synthesis?
That's a great question. And I think that's probably what a lot of people are asking as well, listening to this or seeing all the information about BCAAs online. So when we look at BCAAs, especially leucine has a very important role in muscle protein synthesis. And we need about 2.5 grams of leucine to stimulate that muscle protein synthesis as a way to help with recovery after training, but again, to like even just throughout the day. When we look at the literature and we look at the research, the more whole a product is, or the more whole a protein is, you are going to get better results with muscle building, muscle maintenance. So a product like a BCAAs, right, or even leucine, I guess a singular amino acid, is going to help with muscle protein synthesis, but consuming a more whole form of protein is going to yield better results. For me, and tell me if I'm wrong, because it could be, why would you not go for the most efficient and optimized way to build muscle protein if that is your goal? Why would you choose a product that is not as efficient at building muscle protein when you could have a product that is going to be much more effective?
So essentially, if we had a product that was more effective, would this be like an addition to that, or would it just be like overkill on the amount that we're taking in?
That's a good question. A product like a whey protein, 20 grams of a whey protein is going to give you that 2.5 grams of leucine. It's also going going to give you all your other essential amino acids. You're not going to necessarily need to take additional BCAAs on top of that. I see this a lot of the times too, where people are like, well, I'm going to take a plant-based protein, and then because it doesn't have the right ratio, it doesn't have, enough leucine, then I'm going to add a BCAA on top of that. And that just gets really complicated. And just because you can, like, why should you, right? Like, wouldn't you just rather take a product that is more beneficial, right? Just take a soy protein powder or take a protein powder that contains everything instead of having to make a special concoction. But I don't know.
That's such a good point, because I think that so many people can get caught up in this idea of like, oh, I'm going to use this one and this one and this one together, and then that completes my ratio and stuff like that. But like that can get really complicated. And like we've talked about, like the simple stuff works. And while yes, your 3 mix of something might create that ratio that you're hoping for, but if we can find something that can do that in a single product and makes your life easier, that might be something that's beneficial, especially if you're an athlete who's looking for like a time crunch situation or doesn't have the ability to purchase all 3 of those products, because stuff can get really expensive.
Yeah. And it's not that it's not going to be effective, but it's just not going to be as effective as something else that you could be spending your money on. Or even, looking at like an egg, right? Having 3 eggs are rich in leucine, and you're going to get, 21 grams of protein there. Having 3 eggs is so much cheaper than taking a BCAA powder, and you're going to get better results with a whole egg.
What about something like an energy product? Can you define like what an energy product is, first of all?
So I actually don't think there's any standard of identity for an energy drink or an energy product, and therefore it doesn't have a, I would say, standardized definition. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah, I don't think there is.
And because a lot of these energy products are supplement products, they have supplement labels, not nutrition facts labels. They fall under the supplement regulation guidelines, and those are loosely enforced and loosely regulated. So people can just say that they have energy drinks and energy products. It's very interesting because as a consumer, that might mean something different to every single person. So I think that's a very interesting question, is like, how do we define that? Because I think it is really hard to define it. I do think when we talk about maybe like an energy drink, we think of like a Monster or like a Red Bull or Bang, which I feel like has gone away. I feel like that was really popular a couple years ago, but Bang, they got into like a lawsuit because of the creatine in it. Celsius, super popular right now. Prime, really, really popular right now. Those I feel like are what we think of with like an energy drink, but it's very interesting because that's almost like a marketing thing that's been made up, because these drinks are not actually providing energy, they're providing stimulant in the form of caffeine.
Why is a product like that not worth it?
So first of all, those products are very expensive. And there's often a lot of other ingredients that are listed on the label. I'm not even saying that they're in the product because, again, regulation is very loose on these products. There's a lot of claims and there's just a lot of stuff in these products that are not going to actually help with energy production. The main thing that is often in these products is going to be caffeine. A lot of the times we're relying on these energy drinks as a way to band-aid a poor fueling plan and poor recovery, whether that be sleep, whether that's like rest, stretching, different things like that. And therefore, we're not going to ever optimize our performance and our health because we're trying to cover up our symptoms and we're not really diving into the real reason that we're feeling fatigued at training while we are crashing in the middle of the afternoon.
I think this can even be true for non-athlete populations as well. Like if we're just looking at students in general and they need Celsius to get through their day in order to feel like they're alert in class and things like that, we might not be recovering, like you said, not sleeping enough, not resting enough. We might not be fueling enough in order to feel actually energized versus stimulated in order to get through whatever task it is that we have in order to do that. What are some things that you would recommend maybe implementing in place of an energy product for an athlete?
I think a lot of the time we feel guilty about eating. And so in the afternoon, instead of like fueling the way that we should be fueling or, having carbs and protein and a snack, we're going towards an energy drink because it's giving us energy without giving us sugar or giving us carbohydrates, when sugar and carbohydrates are actually going to be the things that give us energy. So we're almost feeling guilty about eating and therefore grabbing an energy drink because it is a safer or a cleaner option than actually giving our body what we want. So listening to our hunger cues, that's going to be a big thing. Making sure that we're eating 3 to 4 meals throughout the day, eating continuously throughout the day, and then having 1 to 2 snacks, making sure that we're using the performance plate method so we have all 6 essential nutrients in there. That would be my recommendation, I guess, to increase energy levels from a fueling perspective.
This one we're going to have to do a lot of definition on it, but what about hydration products? That's the last thing that we have listed today to talk about as something you might be wasting your money on that's a sports nutrition product. What is the difference between a hydration product and a sports drink?
Just like energy products, I don't think there's a definition for a hydration product or a sports drink. And therefore, it can be so confusing as a consumer because everything is coming out with, we have the best electrolytes, we're the best way to rehydrate, this is clean hydration, this is sugar-free hydration. There's so many different products out there and it's so confusing. People don't know what to get. I mean, even I've talked about this before, but Robbie and I have gone to Costco and he has looked at me and been like, this is so overwhelming. And he lives with a sports dietitian. It's so hard to just navigate all the products out there because they're all different. As a consumer and as an athlete, you might have these different hydration products in different situations, right? So we talked about, a Gatorade, right? We talked about how a Gatorade is really great for giving you energy and some electrolytes around training. Well, that's great, but you shouldn't be drinking just Gatorade throughout the day. You should be drinking water. So it's really hard to navigate. And I think what's happened is there's a lot of bad hydration products out there that people are spending their money on and thinking that it's going to help rehydrate them or help with their performance, and it's not going to.
I think the one that I think of with this specifically as far as a hydration product would probably be a coconut water. That I have seen people carrying around the big jug of coconut water at the gym recently. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about why that might not be helping replenish that person's sweat losses the way that we might think it is, because that's, I think, likely the reason why this person was carrying around or choosing that as their beverage of choice.
Yes, this is very confusing because coconut water does contain electrolytes. It's really rich in potassium, which is an important electrolyte. And most people, when we look at the recommended daily amount, are not getting that amount. They're not getting or hitting the RDA, the recommended amount. And therefore, they might see negative health outcomes because they're not meeting that electrolyte amount. That being said, though, potassium is not really lost in sweat. It's not going to be the main electrolyte that you lose in your sweat. So as an athlete, your potassium needs are not elevated. As a human, right, we look at the human first. You need to meet your potassium needs as a human. Those needs do not really change because you're an athlete. That is not the case with sodium because when you sweat, sodium is the main electrolyte that you lose in your sweat. As an athlete, your sodium needs are going to be elevated. So will this individual at the gym carrying a huge jug of coconut water see performance benefits from the coconut water? Maybe if they're deficient in potassium, but it's not going to help with any of that sweat replenishment. And it's not going to help with replacing the sodium or the electrolytes, quote unquote, that are lost because they're sweating at the gym.
You've talked about this before, but can you talk about the distribution of sweat loss from electrolytes as far as how much percentage-wise is sodium and how much percentage-wise is some of the other electrolytes that we lose?
Yeah. So this is very individualized. It does change based off of your diet, right? So if you eat more salt or you eat more sodium, you're going to have more sodium loss in your sweat. But we can say, generally speaking, about probably 90 to 95% of the electrolytes that you lose in your sweat are going to be sodium. And then 5 to 10% of the other electrolytes that you're losing are going to be potassium, chloride, calcium, magnesium, with the main one actually probably coming from chloride. But most of the time when we're replenishing sodium, right, we're replenishing it with salt, which is sodium chloride. So we're going to get that sodium and that chloride replenishment there.
So what makes a hydration product then a waste of money?
I think it's challenging because we're told by marketing that these products are superior to something like a water. It can be hard to justify, especially for a family or maybe a college student, spending, $3 on a way to just drink more water, right? So something like a Prime is not really going to have the right electrolytes in it. It doesn't have any carbohydrates. So it's going to be just a way for somebody to drink more fluids. Making that $3 when you could just refill your water bottle at a water fountain for free, I'm not sure that the cost there is outweighing the water fountain. And I think we just sometimes, especially, if we have a limited budget with our fueling, we really have to prioritize. And for me, working with an athlete, I'm not recommending they prioritize a product like a Prime or some of these special fancy hydration products when they should be prioritizing other areas of their fueling.
It doesn't need to be fancy and expensive for it to be effective.
Exactly. And even if you're okay, well, I'm low in potassium, Drink coconut water, also eat whole foods. Those are going to be rich in potassium. Coconut water is much cheaper than a Prime, and Prime actually is like only 10% coconut water, I think. So
Yeah.
most of the potassium that's actually in the product has been added in, it's been fortified with it.
Which I think is such an interesting when you do a deep dive into what's actually in that hydration product. So all very interesting, all very like good takeaways to think about, like what is it that's worth our money as far as a sports nutrition product, and where can we actually put in simplified or easier products that maybe cost a little bit less that are still just as effective as some of these really highly marketed products that are out there that are geared towards athletes and performance. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Eat More Carbs podcast. If you have questions for Reilly and I, you can always find us online. We're at the Eat More Carbs podcast, or you can leave them below. You can find Reilly on Instagram at reilly.beatty.nutrition, and you can find me at jenna.fisher.nutrition. Thanks so much for listening. Please make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.